Daniel Cross was once the most respected officer in Grayford until the night his badge was taken. His name was destroyed, and his enemies thought they'd buried him for good. But 5 years later, those same officers started turning up dead with a wooden wolf left behind at every scene. This is the story of how a former cop became the ghost of justice and the nightmare of a corrupt police force. Daniel Cross was once considered the pride of the Grayford Police Department. A decorated officer with a spotless record, he was the kind of man people trusted instinctively. Tall, calm, and methodical, he wasn't just another cop, he was a symbol of order in a town that was slowly unraveling. Grayford had changed over the years. What was once a peaceful, tight-knit community had turned into a place where drug trafficking, gang activity, and political corruption were whispered about more openly each day. Through it all, Cross stood firm. While others turned a blind eye or chased promotions, he walked the straight path. Everything fell apart one rainy October evening. A tip came in about an illegal weapons cache hidden in an abandoned warehouse on the east side of town. The call sounded suspicious, but it was marked urgent. A SWAT team was assembled within the hour. Cross, being the most experienced, was asked to lead. What none of them knew, or perhaps some did, was that the tip was planted. It was a trap, not for criminals, but for Cross. As the team moved in, shots rang out. Chaos followed. When the smoke cleared, a young man lay dead on the floor. His name was Marcus Hale, just 19 years old. He wasn't armed. He wasn't part of any gang. He had no criminal record. He had simply been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Witnesses were scarce. Body cam footage was strangely incomplete. The official report claimed the shooting was accidental, and all evidence pointed to Cross as the one who pulled the trigger. Cross swore he hadn't fired his weapon. He claimed that the entire operation felt wrong from the beginning, but his protests fell on deaf ears. Internal Affairs launched an investigation that lasted barely 2 weeks. The department needed a scapegoat, and Cross was the perfect choice: high profile, respected, and easily discarded to make the story go away. The chief of police, a man Cross had once considered a friend, didn't stand by him. Neither did his fellow officers. When the ruling came, Cross was forced to resign. His pension was revoked. He was told to leave quietly and take responsibility. The media spun the story into a narrative of a once trusted officer losing control. He became a villain overnight. People crossed the street to avoid him. Former friends stopped returning his calls. Within a month, he sold his house and disappeared from Grayford completely. What the town didn't know was that Cross had discovered something just before the raid: a financial trail that didn't make sense, surveillance records that had been tampered with, and a strange message, anonymously sent to his private email, warning him not to go on the raid. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it, but after everything collapsed, it became clear. The raid wasn't just a bust gone wrong, it was a setup. And he was the target. Stripped of his badge and his name, Daniel Cross vanished. But in his silence, something darker began to take shape. For 5 long years, Daniel Cross disappeared from public life. Most people in Grayford assumed he had moved away, maybe started fresh somewhere no one knew his name. But Cross hadn't left the town entirely. Instead, he found shelter in the forgotten forest north of Grayford, living in a rundown cabin left behind by a distant uncle. No electricity, no phone service, just isolation, silence, and time. It was the perfect place for someone who no longer trusted the world around him. Each day in the woods followed a strict routine. He rose at dawn, chopped wood, collected water, and kept himself physically strong. But the real work happened at night. Inside that cabin, Cross built something far more complex than a home. He created a command center, a wall lined with maps, photographs, police records, and red string connecting names, dates, and crimes. A decade of corruption laid bare across the wooden panels. Everything the public was never meant to see. It had started with one question that haunted him since the night of the raid. Why? Why had he been blamed? Why had so many turned their backs so quickly? The more he searched, the deeper the hole became. He used his knowledge of the system to quietly access records, some digital, others physical, stolen during late-night trips back into town. He broke into the police department's old storage locker once, retrieving files that had been marked archived but never investigated. Patterns began to emerge. Unexplained money transfers tied to senior officers, arrest records that vanished, witnesses who had disappeared. And in the middle of it all was the Grayford Police Department's leadership men. and women who had sworn to uphold the law but had instead built a criminal empire under the shield of authority. Drugs were being rerouted from evidence lockers into the streets. Informants were being paid off. Some officers had gotten rich, others had simply looked the other way. Cross had never seen it before, but now the truth was unavoidable. He had been a threat to their secrets. The raid had been staged to silence him. The wolf carvings began as a hobby, something to keep his hands busy during long nights. But over time, they took on new meaning. The wolf was a symbol of something ancient, something that watched from the shadows and struck only when necessary. Cross saw himself in that creature, hunted, misunderstood, but still dangerous. As months turned into years, Cross stopped being angry and started being focused. He didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. He didn't want to kill for the sake of killing. He wanted them to feel what he had felt: fear, betrayal, isolation. He wanted their secrets exposed. He wanted justice, even if it had to come from outside the law. His transformation was complete, not into a criminal, but into something colder, more deliberate. The kind of man who no longer believed in systems or forgiveness. By the end of the 5th year, the wall inside the cabin was nearly full. Every name had a file, every face had a story, every secret had a price, and Daniel Cross was ready to collect. The first body was discovered on a quiet Tuesday morning. Sergeant Ray Duffy, once Cross's superior, was found slumped over the wheel of his car in his own garage. The engine was still running. At first, investigators suspected carbon monoxide poisoning or suicide, but then they saw the message scrawled in red paint across the wall: corrupt. A small wooden wolf figurine rested on the dashboard, carved with precision. It was no random death, and it wasn't the last. Days later, Officer Carla Mendez went missing during her morning jog through Ridgeway Park. Her body was recovered nearly a week later, buried in a shallow grave off the trail. There were no signs of struggle, no DNA, no witnesses. But there was another wooden wolf, this time placed carefully beside her water bottle. The message was clear to those who understood: someone was hunting, and they weren't choosing targets at random. Each of the victims had one thing in common: they had all been part of the raid that ended Cross's career. Some had lied in the report, others had tampered with evidence. One had even stood silently while the chief declared Cross guilty. Now, one by one, they were being punished. At first, the Grayford Police Department dismissed the deaths as coincidences. But then came the fire. Lieutenant Harris, a longtime department veteran, died in his home after a mysterious explosion. Firefighters struggled for hours to contain the blaze. In the wreckage, they found something strange: a heat-resistant box placed near the basement door. Inside it was a flash drive containing financial records, all linked to Harris's offshore accounts and bribes received over the years. Another wolf figure sat next to it, untouched by the flames. The message was evolving. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about exposing the truth. Panic began to spread inside the department. Officers whispered in hallways. Some requested transfers. Others took sudden medical leave. A few even left town entirely. The deaths had shaken the force, but it was the symbols and the evidence that truly disturbed them. Whoever was behind it wasn't just eliminating people. He was unraveling everything they had hidden. Still, no one said Daniel Cross's name out loud. Some feared him. Others refused to believe he was capable of something so calculated. But deep down, many knew the truth. He had been a man of discipline and silence. If he had spent years in hiding, then he had also spent years planning. And now the plan was in motion. The media began to catch wind of the story. A few small articles mentioned strange connections between the deaths, but the full picture hadn't been revealed yet. The police tried to keep it quiet, but word spread through the town like wildfire. A quiet terror settled over Grayford. People no longer trusted the police. Murmurs of a vigilante filled the air. And still, the wolf carved in wood appeared again and again, always watching, always silent. Justice had come to Grayford, but not from a courtroom. When the 4th body turned up, the case officially slipped out of local control. The FBI was called in, and with them came Special Investigator Lydia Rowe. Calm, analytical, and known for her work on high-profile corruption cases, she arrived in Grayford without ceremony. Unlike the local officers, she didn't rely on rumors or second-hand stories. She started from scratch, reviewing every report, every incident, and every death. The pattern became clear quickly. This wasn't chaos, it was a message, written in blood, fire, and silence. Roe noticed what others missed. Each victim had ties to the same failed raid, the one that ended Daniel Cross's career. She read the files thoroughly and saw the gaps in the narrative. Missing footage, conflicting statements, a hasty investigation. She found records of the young man killed that night, Marcus Hale, and discovered there had never been a toxicology report, never been a full autopsy. The deeper she dug, the more cracks appeared in the Grayford Police Department's version of the story. What troubled her most was the evidence being left behind. The wooden wolves weren't just symbols, they were warnings. And the files that accompanied the murders were meticulously organized, pointing to embezzlement, extortion, and abuse of power. Someone was cleaning house, but they weren't careless. There were no fingerprints, no surveillance footage, no trails. Whoever was behind it had police training, and only one name made sense. She reopened Daniel Cross's file. What she found surprised her. Before the incident, Cross had been awarded multiple commendations. He had no record of misconduct, no internal complaints, not even a warning on his file. She noted that his fall from grace had been fast. It smelled like a cover-up. Roe traveled to the northern forests, where locals claimed Cross had been seen years ago. The cabin wasn't hard to find, hidden just off an old hunting trail. It was empty now, but inside was proof of years of investigation. The walls were covered with timelines, photos, case numbers, even copies of restricted police files. Cross had been doing what no one else dared, exposing the truth from the shadows. Back in town, Roe faced a choice. She could label Cross a criminal and try to stop him. Or she could look at the bigger picture. What he had uncovered wasn't just corruption, it was rot that spread through the foundation of the department. The law had failed him, and in its place, he had built his own version of justice. Roe started leaking portions of the evidence to independent journalists. Anonymous tips, confidential documents, whistleblower-style releases. Within days, headlines across the state began reporting on Grayford's police conspiracy. The public outrage was swift. Protests formed outside the department. Calls for resignation filled the airwaves. The chief went silent. Roe never confirmed her involvement. Officially, she stayed on as an investigator. Unofficially, she made sure the truth could no longer be buried. And somewhere in the distance, Daniel Cross watched as his mission began to succeed without ever needing to show his face. The final move came quietly, without warning. While Grayford boiled with protests and legal inquiries, Daniel Cross focused on the last man responsible for his downfall, former police chief Malcolm Raines. The architect of the cover-up, the man who had once stood beside Cross in public and stabbed him in the back behind closed doors, had left town months earlier. Retired, untouched by consequences, and living in a secluded estate far from the chaos he helped create. But Cross hadn't forgotten him. Tracking Raines had taken time. He had changed his name, relocated, and avoided digital footprints. But Cross had learned patience over the years. With each fallen officer, the circle around Raines grew smaller. Eventually, he located the property, a heavily wooded area in the countryside, protected by security systems and tall fences. None of it mattered. Cross bypassed everything with precision, the way he once trained others to do. One night, Raines disappeared from his estate. No signs of struggle, no alarms triggered. His car remained in the driveway. Security footage from the area was mysteriously erased. For 2 days, no one knew where he was until a video appeared online. It was a single shot, taken in a dimly lit room. Raines was tied to a chair, unharmed but clearly shaken. Behind him, pinned to the wall, were documents, photographs, and charts detailing the entire network of corruption he had built. For the first time, the public saw the true scale of the deception, the forged evidence, the illegal raids, the hush money, the intimidation of witnesses. Raines spoke directly to the camera. In a trembling voice, he confessed to everything, not because he had changed, but because he was given no choice. The video ended with a single phrase displayed in white letters on a black screen: "No one is above justice." Below it sat the symbol now known across Grayford, a carved wooden wolf. The fallout was immediate. State authorities raided the Grayford Police Department. Several officers were arrested on the spot. Civil lawsuits were filed. The town's mayor resigned. The media storm exploded nationwide. People demanded change, not just in Grayford but across neighboring towns with similar issues. The story of Daniel Cross became a lightning rod for debates about corruption, justice, and accountability. But Cross himself was nowhere to be found. Despite a nationwide manhunt, no trace of him emerged. Some believed he had fled the country. Others thought he had died, finally at peace after completing his mission. A few swore they had seen him walking the quiet trails outside Grayford, older, bearded, and distant. Nothing was ever confirmed. In the months that followed, the wolf symbol began to appear again, not at crime scenes, but on protest signs, murals, and online campaigns. It had become a new icon of resistance, not for violence, but for truth hidden too long. Though many disagreed with Cross's methods, few denied the impact he had. Daniel Cross had gone from trusted officer to disgraced exile to something else entirely, an unseen force that reminded the powerful their sins would not be forgotten. In the end, he didn't need a badge to bring justice. He had become something bigger, something permanent.